Hello, I'm Henry Bonsu, and this is Doubling Down, a new show in which we delve into a topic that's blazing a trail on social media and beyond. You too can join the debate on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram by using the handle DoublingDownTV, and my panel and I will do our best to respond. Joining me today are cultural critic Father Frank Gelly, the writer and commentator Lola Adeshoye, and the author and blogger Richard Phillips. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, they called it the Day for Freedom, and it attracted some 3,000 protesters to Whitehall, the very heart of the British establishment. The demonstration was called by Tommy Robinson, the former leader of the English Defence League, after he was permanently banned from Twitter for saying that Islam promoted killing people. Robinson was joined by far-right speakers from UKIP and Breitbart, and YouTubers and bloggers who claimed that Twitter and other platforms were denying their freedom of expression. Counter-demonstrators who clashed with Robinson's supporters expressed shock that, for the first time, they were outnumbered by the far-right. But Twitter is standing firm. Its policy on hateful conduct says, freedom of expression means little if voices are silenced because people are afraid to speak up. We do not tolerate behaviour that harasses, intimidates, or uses fear to silence another person's voice. So is Twitter right to ban certain voices, or should people really be allowed to say anything they want on social media and beyond? Let's start with the panel, Frank, Lola and Richard. I'm going to start off with you, Frank. Did you see pictures of the demonstration over the weekend, and were you alarmed by it or encouraged by it?
I did watch the pictures. Yes, ostensibly a demo in favour of freedom of speech. Mm-hmm. In reality, what they meant was freedom to bash another religion, to bash Islam. And
why do you say that?
Because quite clearly, from the tenor of the posters, from the speeches, the bits of the speech I listened to, Islam was the target. And there were some very well-known Islamophobic agitators on the panel. Now, I have many Muslim friends who wouldn't mind an intelligent critique, informed critique of Islam. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to rabble-rousing yobs like Tommy Robinson, mm-hmm. this chap can hardly articulate a proper English sentence.
Well, he's managed to amass quite a number of followers before he was banned from Twitter. He had over 400,000, and they must be responding to something. They must feel he has something. Lola, were you tempted to go down and show your support for the likes of Milo, the former Breitbart editor, or Roger Stone, the Trump
Absolutely
supporter who
not.
was being banned from Twitter?
No, I wouldn't want to show support to them.
Well, you believe in free speech, you know?
I believe in freedom of speech, but freedom of speech has its limits. You know, the freedom to do anything comes with responsibility as well. We live in a society, which means that there are other people. And so in any civil society with rational thinking people, we also have to think about what we're saying, why we're saying it, the effects and consequences of what we're saying. These people, unfortunately, what they're doing is co-opting something positive for their own nefarious ends, basically.
But they say that they and conservative voices are deliberately targeted by Twitter and other social platforms to try and get them off the platform.
I'm on Twitter a lot, and I can say that that is not true. On Twitter, you see all sorts of things, some really awful things. Conservatives are not being targeted. People who are hateful, who are inciting people to violence and animosity and hatred are targeted because they shouldn't be there.
Okay, well, Richard, you're a self-confessed libertarian, I think. Let me run this quote by you. Who said this? I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Evelyn Beatrice Hall, actually.
Yes.
Henry.
People think it's Voltaire, but she wrote the biography.
But she was Voltaire's biographer.
Now, do you believe in that statement?
Yes, I do, pretty much. I think it's extremely difficult to know where any line should be drawn. Mm-hmm. I do believe that, on the whole, the power of your own ideas ought to be enough to overcome other people's if they're derogatory. And I'm really not in favour of censorship at all.
So even if somebody comes on to Twitter and says Islam promotes the killing of people, or 90%, this is something else Tommy Robinson said, 90% of the grooming gangs are Asian Muslims. You don't think that's enough to get somebody banned?
Well, I think you know, these are difficult issues, but somebody has to decide, and that's what worries me. That you know, the people who are deciding, who are they to make the decisions as to what is okay and what's not okay?
That's right. Yeah.
And I have an issue with that.
So it's about who decides.
Well, it isn't about who decides. I think, as a general principle, when you say, as you know, I mean, the quote you mentioned from Evelyn Beatrice Hall, it was supposed to be a kind of summary of Voltaire's position.
Yes.
And, you know, that is a position that, broadly speaking, I take. I think when we were, you know, in my childhood, the phrase that we all had was, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a bad rule of thumb, by and large.
Lola's smiling, I think, a tad acidly and
Well,
ironically.
actually, I mean, I beg to differ, Richard. The words can be very hurtful.
Well,
And
can
can
Lola, let me hear Lola.
Also, I mean, you know, I hate to say this, but I just think the only people I ever hear saying that people should just have the right to say what they want without censorship are usually white people. Yeah. And the reason why I think that is because I think, on the whole, white people are not the target of most of this hate speech and don't understand how it affects people. I've been privy to this discussion for such a long time. Yeah. When I was at university at Cambridge, there was a Muslim cleric who wanted to come and talk, and it was a big issue about whether or not he should, because he was known, I can't remember his name now, but he's been locked up. He was known for his promotion
Anjem Chowdhury, Abu Hamza.
His promotion of hate speech. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think you have to look at who is going to be most affected by these things. If it isn't you, then it might not. You can say, great, speak as much as you want, because you're going to live your life. But if it's someone like me, I'm afraid, because they're inciting people to come and attack people who look like me.
Hold your horses for a second. We'll come back to you very, very shortly. And I know, Frank, especially you want to get in there. But the writer Yasmin Alibai-Brown says the march that happened over the weekend should be a wake-up call. Writing in the I newspaper, she says, the right has weaponized free speech. It's time for liberals to fight back. Does she have a point? I'm just wondering, Frank, I'm not sure if you would describe yourself as a liberal.
No, I'm not. I'm far too turbulent to be a liberal.
A turbulent priest. Remember what happened to those
absolutely.
in this country many moons
But
ago.
I mean, I have a bit of a problem with the phrase hate speech.
Yeah.
Because are we going to allow then only love speech? The opposite of hate is love. So a language, a discourse which was only based on love may be great from a Christian abstract point of view. In reality, even the Gospels, even Jesus said, you will hate what is to be hated.
Yeah.
And so there is a sense, but I do sympathize with Lola.
Yes.
The fact that it is very often people who use freedom of speech as a cover to attack certain minorities.
Especially the extreme right. Now, Yasmin Alibai-Brown, a well-known liberal. And liberals like to think they're the cuddly, lovely people. And she says, you know, it's the far right who have weaponized this issue of free speech. Do you think it's time for liberals to fight back and weaponize love or something else?
Well, liberals need to do something, because one thing that the far right are good at is taking things and using them to their advantage, and liberals just sit there and watch it sort of go away. You know, I think it's very important to, well, first of all, I don't know why the far right is into this victimisation narrative that they have going on, that, you know, somehow they're oppressed and that society's against them, their free speech has been taken away. And really what's been taken away from them is their right to abuse people, which they have a problem with. I think that's how you need to start framing it. But I don't think the average person thinks that, you know, an inability for a Nazi to make hateful comments is
just for
really,
a moment, here there is an agenda.
Taking away free speech.
The British government is trying to triangulate the issue to situate two extremes. Muslims, some types of Muslims, targeted by prevent strategy, but far right, and they are in this virtuous middle, this virtuous centre. To me, that seems to be a strategy to be resisted, because the centre can be actually an extreme centre.
But Richard, where does this leave the libertarian, somebody who would defend to the death somebody else's right to be offensive about you, your religion, your identity?
Let me just, you know, I'm have an issue. I mean, I'm a Jew, and I, frankly, am deeply uneasy about Holocaust denial. I think, because I think you know, that the issue of free speech is greater. It's more important, and you know, ultimately, civilization has to triumph over this. I don't believe in blasphemy as an issue for any religion, I think it's absurd as an idea because, you know, at what point, to where do you extend that? For instance, Darwinism. If somebody insults Darwinism, is that a kind of blasphemy?
In some parts of the world, it might be. But okay, you say, as a Jew then, do you not have a problem with Holocaust denial? So when people like David Irving, that historian, are going around saying
but I don't.
Really happen,
but in the end,
yes,
I
but,
think.
Yes, but.
Well, yes, I do, but I think, you know, it's you have to accept the power of your arguments has to be greater.
So the Germans or the Austrians should not have tried him then, because he went to trial.
I have
In
problems
Austria,
with it. I mean, in a way,
Austria.
I think, you know, if you're asking me honestly, I think it attracts, you know, people to his cause.
PR.
Yes, in a way, and I think that we have to be. You know, those who believe they have the truth have to be vigilant and have to fight back against these arguments. And I also, I'm actually been thinking about this. I think what is required almost is a kind of some sort of independent fact-checking, sort of state-run fact-checking thing.
State-run.
Well, I know that. Okay. Sorry, that is the point.
Richard, the moment you say state-run, I have to pause you. We need to move on.
You know what I mean? I'm some sort of independent fact-checking that people will believe.
We want to exercise our right to free speech, and our viewers are doing so on social media. And here's what some of you have been saying. Let's take a look at Twitter first. And this comes from Adrian Scott, who says, "It, as in the march, is in defence of fascism and racism. Wake up. Look at who the speakers and sponsors are. Don't be fooled by the deliberately misleading name." Then we have somebody calling themselves Fresh Sauerkraut, saying, "Do not like Tommy, but the one thing that protects his opinions and mine is free speech. And when that is infringed, one side falls and then the next." Let's take a look at Facebook too. We'll start off with Political B, who says, "Biggest fraud in town is Sadiq Khan," he's the mayor of London. "Thousands of people descended in London outside Whitehall for a Day for Freedom march. Despite it being right under his nose, not a word from the useless Khan. Hashtag Day of Freedom." Then we have this from Graham Holland. Graham says, "Freedom of speech unless you are condemning Israel's actions against Palestine, and then you're anti-Semitic." Remember, you too can join the debate on Twitter, Facebook or Instagram by using the handle DoublingDownTV. Now, there's a huge amount of interest in the impact social media is having on society, not just here in the UK, but in France, of course, in Germany, in Kenya, all over the world, in fact. And one of the leading academics in Britain looking at this is Carlo Schwartz, a researcher at Warwick University, who recently published a paper called "Fanning the Flames of Hate, Social Media and Hate Crime." And he joins us via Skype now. Carlo, hello to you.
Good evening.
Now, you focus in on the use of social media by the far-right party Alternative for Deutschland. What did you find?
Yeah, basically, as you already mentioned, in our recent paper, my co-author Carsten Müller and I study the relationship between hate speech on social media and real-life hate crimes taking place in Germany. And more specifically, basically, we analyze if there is any relationship between the amount of anti-refugee speech we find in social media and on the Facebook page of the Alternative for Germany, the far-right party, and the amount of hate crimes that are taking place overall in Germany and in specific municipalities.
And what did you find the relationship to be?
Yeah. Overall, probably our three most important findings can be summarized in the following. The first thing we document, there's a very strong correlation over time of the amount of online hate speech and the number of anti-refugee incidents that take place. That means basically in weeks where you observe a lot of hate speech online, these are also the weeks in which a lot of anti-refugee incidents will take place. In this context, correlation obviously does not imply any kind of causation. That's why me and my co-author dig deeper, and we in particular analyze the location of the hate crimes. And we are able to show basically that the hate crimes are over-proportionally concentrated in municipalities with higher social media usage. And that is some kind of indication that the areas in Germany which are more exposed to the online hate speech because they are using just social media are more likely basically to then be also the places where we observe the anti-refugee incidents.
And Carlo, you were focusing on what's happening in Germany, but if you did the same study in the UK or France or the US where there's been some concern, what do you think you might find?
Overall, basically, our finding, it seems highly likely that the mechanism we discover in Germany is probably also would be at place at the UK or in the US. And Cass Sunstein from Harvard University has written a lot about how social media can reinforce existing extreme viewpoints. The difference, the magnitude of the effect could obviously vary, since Germany, during the refugee crisis, the tensions were definitely running high already. But in a follow-up project, me and my co-author are also analyzing the situation in the US for anti-Muslim hate crimes, and so far, basically, the results look at least similar.
I've got three people with me in the studio. We've got Frank, Lola and Richard. One of you, I'm going to choose one of you to ask a question. Which one looks most eager? Lola.
Hi, Carlo. My question is, what do you think needs to be done about this, if anything?
Yeah, I think basically it's a really tough question, and it's of course outside of the scope of our particular research. But overall, basically in Germany now there's been a new law to basically fight online hate speech. But what this law basically does, it puts the onus on Facebook to remove hateful content. And basically Facebook now just becomes the censor who is now supposed to decide what is hate speech and what is allowed. And if basically, if they do not remove openly hateful speech, they can be fined with up to 50 million posts. And I don't think this is the ideal solution, since in general I also would come down on the side of free speech here. I think if free speech is too important, that we should leave it to the social media companies. And I think the most important step would to be fight bad ideas with better ideas from our side. And on the one hand, we could try to make people aware that they're moving in echo chambers in social media, and that they are mainly exposed to basically their own beliefs, and that they basically are cut out basically from differing opinions. And I think we have to just try harder to expose people to different points of view.
All right, Carlos Schwarz from the University of Warwick, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, the British government is getting very serious about this. It's being reported in the Daily Telegraph that hate preachers who use social media to peddle their extreme views could face tough new sentences of up to 6 years in prison. The Sentencing Council has opened a consultation about this, and I quote, it says, hate speech type offences where inflammatory speeches were given by influential figures with the intention of stirring up racial hatred.
Henry, does that include the publishers of newspapers who publish articles implying that George Soros is
part of some worldwide conspiracy?
As the Daily Telegraph did.
It may very well do. Who knows? I mean, this is something that the government is looking at. There's a big debate in the British Parliament.
Well, we know that they're not going to. What I'm trying to say is, and in point of fact, the argument that social media is somehow different from other media,
Well, I suppose it's because it's unfiltered. That's why.
But can I just say that as a kind of Trump junkie, I actually pay to read the Washington Post.
Yes.
I'm a complete, and I can tell you, if you want to talk about an echo chamber, look at the letters to the Washington Post. 99% of them are, anti-Trump because of the position of the Washington, not as I am, by the way. But it is just as much of an echo chamber as any social media.
The big question is what the possible impact. Lola, go on, and then Frank.
I honestly think that people completely underestimate the power of social media. I spend a lot of time on social media. It's an echo chamber of echo chambers, because basically you can completely configure your life to not hear anything outside of what you want to hear. I spend a lot of time actually trying to find other viewpoints, because social feeds me stuff that basically reinforces my own
Well, it's using the algorithm,
all the time.
thinking it knows what you want
Exactly,
to think.
and also I think we underestimate the sort of rhetorical tactics that people use on social media are quite different from what they use outside of that.
Yeah.
The level of persuasion and how people are basically being marketed to is very different from a regular conversation. And the idea that we should just, fight with our own good ideas, it seems to me that most people on the other side are not very good at doing that anyway.
All right, before I bring you in, Frank, let's have a look at what people have been saying. They've been leaving voice messages on our Facebook page, so let's listen to a few.
Hi, I'm Manny from London. I'm for freedom of speech. I feel like it's a universal right for anyone and it should be protected at all costs.
Hi, my name is Daniel from London. I don't think you should be allowed to say whatever you want under the umbrella of free speech. When you denigrate someone's religion, race or sexuality, it is hate speech. Simple.
My name's Khalida, calling from Southall. I don't believe that people should be able to say whatever they want. When my grandmother came from the Caribbean all those years ago, there were signs in the windows that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. I don't want us to go back to a time where people think they can share their racist views openly. There are laws in place for a reason. And if the government wants to strengthen the laws on so-called hate speech, that's a good move.
Powerful end thought from Khalida there. Those laws, Frank, are there for a reason. They didn't happen by accident. It's because people had freedom to say whatever they liked, some decades ago, and they abused it.
Funnily enough, a voice which has, powerful voice, which has been heard in favour of cracking down on freedom of speech, has been the voice of a Pope, of Pope Francis. 2 years ago, he was flying somewhere, and shortly after the Charlie Hebdo massacre in Paris, and a journalist asked him, about should we free to criticize another religion? And the Pope said, you should not offend the faith of others. It is very dangerous. And he said, or anything which is very dear to you. And he said, if someone offended or insulted my mama, I would punch him. And he did, actually, the gesture convey that. Now, Pope Francis is not actually very intelligent. He's not a very intelligent Pope.
Your words, not mine.
Because he doesn't know, I'm an Anglican, I'm a Protestant, I can say what I like.
Yes.
Because he contradicted the words of Jesus.
Yes. Who said, turn the other cheek.
Which are words directly, especially.
Sorry, isn't that hate speech? Haven't you just said that God's representative on earth for 2 billion people is not very intelligent? How is that not hate speech?
I didn't call him God's representative
But he is, according to the Catholic Church.
He's the leader of a church.
But he is, according to Catholics.
Yeah,
and actually, you don't believe in God, so why should you stand up and decide that? I'm not taking any...
Let's have a couple of closing thoughts. Where is this going? We're going to get laws. Wait a second. We're going to get laws, aren't we? What do you think? Do we need laws, fresh laws to deal with social media?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Richard, what do you think?
I think fewer laws are probably a very good thing. I think by and large, look, there are clearly instances where the intention is malice. I accept that. But it's a fine line. And when we talk about the right to, to say, to offend other people's religion, what about my right for my lack of religion to be offended? What about my beliefs? And that doesn't seem to come into it as far as, the religious by and large.
So do you feel marginalised as an atheist?
I don't.
Not really.
I don't. What I feel is that, well, let me just, we have a kind of censorship in America, of a certain kind. No presidential candidate can stand up in America and say they don't believe in God.
Right. So they don't have absolute freedom of speech.
They don't. They cannot do it. They can't do it because of the prevailing wisdom of the general American public. They can't do it.
For the same reason, Jeremy Corbyn cannot say I'm a Republican because he would lose in votes.
Exactly.
That's losing votes.
Same point. Lola, very quickly, you live both in the UK and the US. Where do you feel more free to say what you want?
I feel more free in America.
In America.
Yeah.
I think we better leave it there. That's the epitaph on this discussion. Thank you very much, all three of you.
We are not making America great.
No. And that's it for this week. Thanks very much to my studio guests, Frank Gelly, Lola Adeshoye and Richard Phillips. Check out Doubling Down on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for news of next week's topic. And remember to get your views in early. Till then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.